Please welcome Littler shareholders Alyesha Dotson and Claire Deason.
Welcome, and good morning, everyone.
Democracy, a system of government by the whole population, or all the eligible members of a state, typically through elected representatives.
Typically, but maybe not always. 6 in 10 of Americans currently believe the democratic system of government in the United States is at a real risk of total collapse.
That sounds extreme, but it's not as extreme as you may think. According to Professor Stephanie Forrest and researcher Joshua Damond in a study published by the Brookings Institute, unmitigated polarization will eventually destroy our democracy.
Ever the innovators, corporate players think they have all the answers. The past year has been filled with efforts and ideas from companies large and small. How to make politics feel less broken. For whatever reason we believe it, most of us believe that this is a make or break moment in the United States. So it's worth taking a moment to acknowledge the elephant in the room, and the donkey too. Today, we're going to talk about the growing gap between left and right, the increasingly vitriolic nature of sociopolitical topics in the United States. You may not even live in the United States, but you're probably aware of what we have going on here. We've already shown you some of the current events of our political time. We're just a few seconds into this thing, and you might already be feeling angry, defensive, righteous, indignant. And look, you might keep feeling those things for the next hour or so.
Why? Because we did not all just emerge from a cave to attend this conference. Each of us is a voter, a watcher of the news, maybe an advocate, a donor, a protester. That's democracy. And I certainly hope we can embrace it.
I do too. But we also hold roles that require us to look at the big picture, to assess risk, to make decisions in the best interests of our organizations. You bring your own personal views into that role. It's simply impossible to let them go. And so we're not here to ask you to ignore your personal views. What we do ask is that you keep enough of your heart and your mind open to hear what we have to share. We think it'll help.
Oh, God. Sorry, that's me. Sorry. Hi, honey. Yeah, hi, I can't talk. Yeah. No, it's fine. No, fine means I can't talk right now. I'm at Littler's executive employer. And everyone's looking at me. Okay, no, I don't love Littler more than you. Yes, I actually did see what my CEO just posted on TikTok, and it looks like a mess. I'm actually looking for a breakout room. Yeah, sorry, the presentation looks great, you guys. I'll duck backstage. Yeah, I gotta see what's happening on Twitter. Apparently social media is blowing up about what he posted, but great job. I will call you back, honey, I love you, goodbye.
Oh my God, who was that guy?
Okay, well, so that's Tim. He's taking a breather, apparently, from the special session here to catch up on some calls, I guess. Plus, I suspect he's probably too embarrassed to come back to his seat now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Tim, he told me at dinner last night that the employer is his tiny moment of peace in a life of nonstop demands from clients and customers alike.
Poor Tim.
Well.
But yeah, he's the general counsel at Swashbuckle Incorporated, a rapidly growing Miami-based company providing consulting and design services for houseboat owners and enthusiasts worldwide. They're disrupting houseboats, my friend.
Houseboats?
Houseboats.
Excuse me, could you guys keep it down out there? I am checking on this TikTok that my wife sent me about the First Amendment that my CEO just posted on the internet. Sometimes I wish our CEO wasn't so out there. I mean, it's like being back in law school. But here, will you guys take a look at this?
Sure, put it on, Tim.
American businesses that believe in the First Amendment right to free speech and political expression are under attack. Do you think companies shouldn't be overly regulated for political reasons? Do you think that instead of canceling ideas we disagree with, companies should be allowed to express their values and let the market handle it? If so, you're likely under pressure from stakeholders who disagree. Remember, a government that bans expression that isn't fraudulent, violent, or hateful is worse than the alternative of allowing it. We are better than that. Don't let politically correct snowflakes suppress the free market and free speech. A private company, like a private citizen, may engage in popular or unpopular, wise or unwise political activities or expressions. From states that crack down on socially conscious investing to anti-language laws. Who feels like they are stuck in the middle of this red rock and blue place with me?
That's Swashbuckle's CEO.
Sure is. They call him Captain Swashbuckle, Claire. Celebrity CEOs are all the rage these days, and he's just trying to keep up by taking a stance, much to Tim's chagrin.
Hey, I have an idea. What if we ask Tim to stick around and weigh in?
That's a great idea, because Tim is us. Tim is each of you. Tim's that everyman, right? He's stuck between that red rock and that hard blue place.
Right on. Because Tim's predicament is directly related to what we were going to cover next, which is where our conversation on democracy meets the First Amendment, meets an in-house counsel or HR professional's day-to-day juggling act. Hey, Tim, do you want to stick around?
You bet I do. This TikTok is just the latest juggling act thrown at me. It's not like a day goes by without some conflict over a political hot topic landing on my desk. I never know whether to try to shut it down or let it play out or pick a side, much less what our CEO wants me to do. Look, I know Captain Swashbuckle is one of those people who feels like this is an important political moment in the US. I get that. Look, I feel that way too. I just don't know how my company is supposed to fit into it. So, where do we even begin?
The First Amendment. Incredibly, this antiquated little sentence has been the focus of quite a lot of drama and discussion these days. Speech, religion, expression, peaceful assembly.
Oh, 6 feet apart, of course.
Of course. These things seem pretty straightforward.
You know what? Let's do a little con law lesson, shall we?
Oh gosh, do we have to?
Oh, we do. Because companies have similar rights. Although they are often maligned, corporate speech rights are an important feature of a well-functioning democracy.
As far back as 1819, courts have recognized corporations are entitled to at least some of the protections of the Constitution.
Fast forward to 2010, in the Citizens United case, the Supreme Court upheld the rights of corporations to make unlimited political expenditures under the First Amendment.
4 years later, with the Hobby Lobby case, the court found the Religious Freedom Restoration Act exempted Hobby Lobby from aspects of the Affordable Care Act because those aspects placed a substantial burden on the owner's free exercise of closely held religious beliefs.
And since the Hobby Lobby case, corporate political speech has exploded.
But as Spider-Man's uncle, Uncle Ben, famously told his nephew, Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. Responsibility for what?
Hey, if a corporation can speak, Citizens United tells us that speech can come in the form of relatively unrestrained and untracked donations to political candidates.
Since 2010, publicly available data show corporations donated $282 million to Republican candidates and $38 million to Democratic candidates.
And Hobby Lobby also tells us that corporations can have political opinions expressed through their policies and their practices.
Investors, consumers, and employees ask themselves, well, if a corporation has a voice, what should it say? Now that we know companies can have opinions, that leads to an expectation and a desire that those opinions will align with our values. And this is a trend that is really on the rise.
Ooh, let's hear some data.
Saida?
Hey, Alyesha. Hey, Claire. Hey, Tim, is it? It's Saida Hamid, just dropping in with some statistics. I lead Littler's data analytics. Y'all know I love statistics. Public relations firm Edelman studies consumers' expectations of corporate political action. In 2017, 57% of global consumers reported they would buy or boycott a brand, depending on its position on a social or political issue. 1 year later, that number went up 7 percentage points. And by 2021, the Edelman survey reported that 86% of survey respondents expect corporate leaders to engage publicly on social and political topics. Corporate marketing leaders have observed this shift and responded in kind. In May 2020, 80% of chief marketing officers responding to the CMO survey did not think their companies should choose sides on politically charged topics. But by September 2022, over 40% said it was appropriate for their brand to take a public stance about legislation. And nearly a quarter of these executives believe that they and their CEOs should be the ones speaking up. Okay, back to you, Alyesha and Claire.
Thanks, Saida. That's a big 180-degree turn. 1 minute, marketing tells us not to speak out. The next minute, they're pushing for more public statements. How many of you have witnessed this change in your own organizations?
These changing demands from marketing are driven by changing demands from consumers. Something really compelling from the most recent Edelman survey. Respondents in the United States were more concerned about the future of their country than they were concerned about their own personal future.
And for respondents age 41 and younger, the majority agreed brands are better partners for change than government. That's people on both sides of the political aisle.
That sounds surprising at first, but in fact, trust in government has been declining for decades. Public trust in government was at a 3-decade high right after 9/11, but it's declined significantly since then. Since 2007, no more than 30% of United States residents say that they trust the federal government to do the right thing.
Okay, so if we put this all together, we have real live people with speech and spending rights who get to decide where to spend their money, where to spend their time, and they make those decisions increasingly based on the ethos of the companies they interact with, because many of them believe that brands, more than governments, hold the key to future security and protection. That all sounds kind of neat and a little terrifying, honestly, but it's very American. We put our money where our hearts and minds take us.
Now, consider that with the state of the law in corporate speech since Hobby Lobby in 2014, people want corporations to speak, and corporations have the constitutional protection to do so.
And to be fair, there's been a heck of a lot to talk about since 2014. Nike featured Colin Kaepernick in an ad campaign. Walmart and Dick's Sporting Goods stopped selling weapons in response to gun violence. Republican consumers flocked to Goya Foods when its CEO voiced support for the former president. Democrats cashed out their savings to take their kids to Disney World after the company's CEO opposed Florida's anti-wokeness law. Countless corporations voiced a desire to pay travel benefits for women seeking abortions out of state after Roe was overturned.
Now, at this point in our presentation, you may all be wondering, what the heck does this have to do with employment law?
You know, Alyesha, I consider it a great honor if I get that question every year. The answer is this. The more a company pushes itself to express a sensitive or touchy social or political viewpoint, the more its executives take positions that may contradict the personal beliefs of its employees. And the more that its employees are at odds with one another on topics that are now fair game to discuss in the workplace, the greater the likelihood that these communications and interactions will cause friction and potentially actionable disparities and unlawful conduct in the workplace. By raising our corporate voices about hot-button topics, we invite sociopolitical vitriol to our front door, increasing the likelihood of disputes and litigation. And counsel and HR guide the ship, or the houseboat, through these choppy waters.
Hey, sorry to interrupt, but can I ask a question?
Sure.
It sounds like the First Amendment protects corporations, and it also sounds like Captain Swashbuckle's speech could be protected as though it's the company's speech. But can Swashbuckle violate the First Amendment?
No. Contrary to what every employee who has ever bemoaned how a new policy that a private employer puts into effect will limit their right to free speech, the First Amendment does not limit private employers. The Bill of Rights and the First Amendment limit only government actors, not private actors.
Okay, but do you think those Gen Z kids are really onto something? You know, maybe brands, since they don't have to worry about stepping on free speech rights, are like the governments of the future? Gosh, I was a poli-sci major, but I'm not sure I'm ready for that.
Yeah, that's a bold idea, Tim. And you're right. That's exactly where the focus and pressure is on companies today. But of course, companies have to worry about other rights that their employees have. Tim, are you listening?
Tim, what's wrong?
Oh, man. You guys have to help me with this.
Sure.
It's an email with, oh no, a video from our CEO. This won't be good. Here, take a look.
So many exclamation points.
Look at all those exclamation points.
Hey, Timbo. I'm out communing in nature and thinking, I'm all jazzed up about this idea. I think this whole corporate social justice thing is a scam. We shouldn't be pushing any political agendas. Corporate virtue signaling and hypocrisy are everywhere. And yeah, I know, marketing and HR are all about this stuff these days. And everyone wants to see me tweet this snowflake mumbo jumbo. But we need to get back to our real values. And that's sucking it up, working hard to make houseboats pretty. So, I know we just started that affinity group for women last month, but I've changed my mind. We're done with that. I'm gonna send the email to the company on Monday. I think they're gonna love it. Hardcore houseboats, that's us. Well, I only got a couple minutes before my hot yoga class, so we'll chat in 5. Captain Swashbuckle, out.
Oh, Tim, you live in interesting times, my friend.
Help me. What am I supposed to tell him to fix this? In 5 minutes. The press, our clients, and the workforce are not going to appreciate having the company's inclusion, equity, and diversion message flip overnight. Oh, God, you guys, the clock is ticking.
Okay, let's think through what's likely to resonate with Captain Swashbuckle. Option 1, talk about the pushback he's going to receive from the workforce who's going to feel cheated. Maybe flag for him that the employees will leave because they feel Swashbuckle isn't an employer who cares about them as people.
Yeah, that's not gonna work. He loves that kind of pushback, and he welcomes litigation. All press is good press, he says.
Okay, back to the drawing board. Alyesha?
Let's talk Captain Swashbuckleese, so Captain Swashbuckle's language. First, really listen to what he has to say. Specifically, what makes the current program feel inauthentic to him? Instead of stopping inclusion, equity, and diversity at Swashbuckle tomorrow to the ire of nearly everyone, think about what kind of an employer Swashbuckle is. What are its values, and how can you build an IE&D program that's right for Swashbuckle?
You know, I have to ask, though, how did we get here in the first place if the CEO thought IE&D was such a bad idea?
That is such a great question, and it reveals something really common these days. Employers feel this immense pressure to establish IE&D programs, thinking it's the kind of thing they're supposed to do to keep up. But IE&D, it's not really a set it and forget it kind of thing, and I suspect that's exactly what happened at Swashbuckle.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. But not every employer needs to implement every hot-ticket IE&D initiative just to keep up with the corporate Joneses. And just like humans, corporations evolve at their own pace.
Hey, just because Swashbuckle is a relatively conservative organization that doesn't want to make wide strides in the IE&D space, it doesn't mean that the company doesn't care about its employees or that IE&D isn't right for this company. Instead, go back to what Captain Swashbuckle does want for the company.
Yeah, well, he said he wanted to go back to hard work. But I have to ask, why does he think a women's affinity group prevents the company from working hard? It certainly doesn't.
That is absolutely true. These things are not mutually exclusive. Hey, Tim, speak to his values. Talk to him about how affinity groups have a direct impact on an organization's bottom line by enhancing its recruitment and retention efforts. When Swashbuckle's employees are more connected to the organization through trust, they are free to be more productive if they are happier, and they're less likely to organize unions or file lawsuits or class actions against the company.
And Tim should reassure the captain that affinity groups today don't mean the company is obligated to adopt anything that he finds inauthentic tomorrow. IE&D is a journey that Swashbuckle can take at its own pace.
Now look, do affinity groups require some legwork? Of course they do. But with thoughtful implementation and continuous good shepherding, an employer can leverage affinity groups to the benefit of the organization and its workforce.
Okay, you guys are great. I'll try that. Okay, he went for it. For now. Tomorrow I'll sit down with him and outline what he calls his vision for IE&D.
That's so great, Tim. And don't forget to work with someone who has deep IE&D knowledge, preferably an attorney, so that you can maintain privilege in the making of that sausage as you think through Swashbuckle's unique IE&D journey.
Hey, Alyesha,
Yeah?
I'm still kind of worried about what's going to happen here.
Yeah, I gotta admit, I kind of am too, Claire.
How about y'all? Who's worried about what will happen next? I am pretty sure that Captain Swashbuckle has a different opinion than many of the company's employees on probably a lot of things. There might be a divide there that we can't ignore.
You're likely right. In fact, according to a study led by Professor Elizabeth Kempf at Harvard Business School, partisanship amongst executives, specifically in the United States, increased by nearly 8% between 2008 and 2020, which Professor Kempf describes as quite a sizable change.
That's a huge change, and one that's, again, uniquely American. The Carnegie Endowment for International Peace published a study last year confirming that no established democracy in recent history is as politically polarized as the United States.
This is why Professor Kemp's research is so profound. Professor Kemp's study found that political homogeneity, that is, everyone being the same, is twice as large among corporate executives than the overall population in the US. Even with that increasing polarization nationwide, our country's CEOs are polarizing even faster.
In what direction? Anyone want to fancy a guess? One of the two primary political parties in this country claims the affiliation of nearly 70% of corporate executives. Which one is it? That's right. Nearly 70% of US executives vote primarily Republican. I don't find that particularly surprising, do you?
No, I don't. What I am surprised by, though, is that this level of primarily Republican homogeneity among executives, it remains really high. Even over the past few years, as social and consumer demands have shifted a lot of pressure onto corporate actors to embrace what we typically see as more liberal ideas. And even as the political balance amongst the US on the whole hasn't moved by more than a few points, off 50-50 for several years now.
Alyesha and Claire, I just got a new video from the captain, and it turns out his personal views aren't the only thing giving him heartburn over this. Take a look.
Sure.
Tim, man, look, we have to slow this group down. Do you remember when we pushed to delay those reef protection rules for that big client event? I made some donations to some folks on the congressional committee, and now they're opposing that new state law that protects abortion. Look, I don't want to get caught in the middle of some women's rights debacle if those donations are made public. I was just trying to do what Swashbuckle needed. I'm just trying to make these clients happy on their houseboats, Timmy. You get that? We have to get out of all this social justice stuff.
Well, Captain Swashbuckle is stuck between a red rock and a hard blue place. But if it's any consolation to the captain, he is not alone. Professors Dorothy Lund and Leo Strine recently published an article in Harvard Business Review describing what they coin as the legitimacy problem and the hypocrisy trap. The fact that the clear ideological contradictions between old-fashioned corporate political speech, political donations, and new corporate speech, public statements, will inevitably be bad for business. What to do is clear. First, don't expect corporate political donations to never see the light of day. And second, review what political spending has been made as part of an evaluation of any public-facing actions on socio-political topics.
All right. But let's keep this balanced, okay? It's not just Republican executives who are polarized, making conservative donations while promoting progressive ideas and potentially falling into this so-called hypocrisy trap. Liberal-led organizations are not all unicorns and sunshine either. Instead of increased political diversity when Democrats lead, more lefties and righties working together to run a company, most recent studies show that U.S. companies are becoming politically siloed in their executive teams, regardless of what side of the divide they're on. The result is an increased potential for this incongruous result, a gap between what the executives believe and the compromises they need to make to run their business.
And get this, Professor Kemp's study was even able to pinpoint the states where homogeneity at the top ranks of the organizations is the most extreme on both sides of the political aisle.
Oh, wait, let me guess. New York, California, Texas, and Ohio, right?
That's right. And we don't need to spend time telling you which side of the political line those states fall.
Yeah, but what about the employee base? If executives are all aligned on one side of the aisle in the company, is the same true for the company's employees? Not at all. While polarized executives have a bit of a tendency to self-select and create these silos for themselves, the same isn't true of the employees who work for them. After all, they don't choose their coworkers.
In fact, these days, work is one of the few remaining places where the average American will regularly interact with people of different political persuasions. The workplace is the final frontier of cooperation and compromise.
Finally, some semblance of hope. You know, as I'm listening back here, thinking about all this power we have as a company, the same constitutional rights as people in terms of speech, basically, I'm really thinking, why does all this feel so hard? If you look around, you see companies all over the place, swooping in and making it clear what they think is right and wrong, boldly going where no company has gone before, if we want to keep the Star Trek references going. And we're not just lobbying for changes to laws that will help our business grow, we're also lobbying for policies and legislative actions that we think are right and good and important for democracy. Plus, there are plenty of other companies on the other side. We have to stick our necks out to speak up for what we believe. So I guess what I mean to say is, if we have all this power and we can make real change, and it sounds like people truly believe that, why does it feel like a root canal every time we take a stand?
The answer lies in the simple fact that while the company may speak for the relatively uniform views of its executive team, speaking for all its employees is becoming harder and harder because our sociopolitical beliefs divide us now in ways they never have before.
Atlantic Ideas writer Yascha Mounk describes our current predicament as a doom spiral of pernicious polarization, where once our political views were merely about what party we believed would get the job done best, today polarization extends to everything, from the tortillas we buy to the sports stars we admire.
And apparently, who we value to extend our families. Let's hear some surprising data from our very own Paul Bateman.
Hi, Alyesha and Claire. I'm glad to pop in. As Littler's Chief Inclusion, Equity, and Diversity Officer, I have to say, I sometimes find myself stuck between polar opposite views, so I'm tuning in. On the topic of polarization, did you know that in 1960, only 4% of Democrats and 4% of Republicans said they'd be disappointed if their child married someone from the opposite political party? But when that poll was repeated by the New York Times in 2016, 60% of Democrats and 63% of Republicans responded that they would actively object to their child marrying a person of a different political affiliation. Politics, well, life, is more polarized than ever. Back to you, Alyesha and Claire.
Thanks, Paul. But at work, avoiding people with views that differ from our own is not so easy. In a 2022 survey of Zeddy users, the company found that nearly 40% of employees surveyed felt uncomfortable at work because of political differences among their colleagues. So this leaves us where?
Between a red rock and a hard blue place. 1, the employee base as a whole is getting more polarized, culturally, socially, and politically. 2, the company's customers, employees, and likely its marketing team increasingly want the company to speak out on social and political topics, and typically in favor of that left-leaning viewpoint. 3, the executive team, the folks that make these decisions, they're far more likely to all align all together with only one of those ideologies in the mix. And they're more likely to be on the conservative side, at best. That's a difficult personal challenge. At worst, it's a public embarrassment of hypocrisy, Claire.
And that is how Captain Swashbuckle finds himself in this predicament. It's like he climbed aboard a houseboat that he didn't want to sail in the first place. No wonder he's frustrated. What's worse than not speaking out? It's saying something you don't really mean. So what do we take away?
Inclusion, equity, and diversity efforts are not effective if they are not genuine. You have to be authentic. Executive leadership is likely to have different personal viewpoints than the employee base as a whole. Be prepared for that. Don't pretend it's not there. Figure out where those contradictions lie and deal with them proactively. There is more to these actions than the cynical angle of wanting to appear on trend. But what we want from the program has to be decided before we create it. Think before you act.
Okay, yeah, no, Tim's going to need that advice more than ever. Wait until you see what he's dealing with now.
You guys, I'm reading messages on our interoffice chat. I can't believe what I'm seeing. Why can't they just get back to work? Oh.
Woke snowflakes again.
Oh.
Real men at Swashbuckle.
Oh my gosh, it doesn't end.
Man pity party.
Oh.
Ooh.
Oh, macho BS, yeah.
Sexist crap. This isn't good.
I'm scared too.
Ooh, burn, Amy, burn. Oh. It's wage and hour problem, maybe?
Yeah.
Well. Surprise, surprise. An intranet platform where employees can talk to each other has exploded in controversy. What is Tim going to do now? Alyesha, you talk to many employers on a daily basis who face problems like this. How do you recommend we handle it?
Indeed, I do, Claire. It's important to acknowledge that no two situations are alike. The resolution that worked for one employer is not necessarily going to work for another. To de-escalate this situation, Tim should consider ghostwriting a statement on behalf of leadership. In it, the company would ideally espouse that all employees are treated fairly without regard to protected characteristics, and that all employment decisions are based solely on business-related qualifications. Then, the statement will go on to say that the company supports healthy debate and constructive criticism. However, the statement will remind employees that all their behaviors, including on electronic platforms such as these, need to be respectful and conform to the company's EEO, anti-harassment, and anti-discrimination policies.
Great. And then we can delete the entire platform and just sack these jerks, right?
Whoa, Tim, slow your roll. We don't love a free-form intranet platform either, but once you have one, you can't exactly turn off the spigot, immediately delete the content, and terminate the employees who have said things that others might disagree with. At least not absent some thought.
That's right, Claire. Swashbuckle hasn't, for example, sunset all the comments after a predetermined time. So the comments here, they're going to live on that platform without some action. But the risk in deleting is in that making their comments, employees have potentially made complaints about harassment, about discrimination, and arguably entered into National Labor Relations Act protected territory to boot. Even if Swashbuckle is not a unionized employer, it nevertheless cannot chill employees' speech about the terms and conditions of their employment. Instead, Tim, consider pausing further comments and postings in the short term while the company revisits the issue of intranet platforms.
Well, okay, hold on. I remember when we set up this intra-office chat thing, it was because we wanted people to be able to, be exposed to different types of viewpoints, that sort of thing. I remember the captain jumping up and down at one of our annual retreats saying, "You gotta get into each other's faces, drink each other's brains," or something like that. You can't tell me that just shutting down the chance for people to get to know one another is the answer to all this polarization, right?
Not entirely. But drinking brains isn't going to help either, Tim. The answer doesn't lie in platitudes of tolerance, when in reality, we are at each other's throats. And we can't just throw everyone in a room and tell them to work it out together. In fact, in the Brookings study, it noted that when intolerance and polarization is as ingrained as it's become, increased exposure to different viewpoints can actually exacerbate that polarization, not build connection.
Hey, anyone finding themselves in the comments section of a social media platform knows just how entrenched beliefs become when we're inundated with opposing views.
Okay, so hold on. Let me get this right. Our CEO can't walk back his political donations or his social justice efforts, even though they conflict. Our effort to give employees a place where they can talk about their viewpoints with each other has now turned into a giant mudslinging brawl. We could pause it, limit it, tell them to stop, but we can't. Look, we are trying to change the world here. We have all this power, and it is a mess. Why can't people understand why those donations were important? Why can't people understand that we support gender equity, but taking a stand about abortion feels a little bit too far? Why can't people understand that, my gosh, talking about hunting isn't about politics in the first place? What does that have to do with woke snowflakes? We can't make everybody happy, but can't we try to convince them?
Well, No. Tim, I'm sorry. One little houseboat company can't do any of that. I'm sorry if any of you tuned in for those answers. I don't have them. We don't have them. I don't think anyone does.
But here's what we do know. In the ZETI study, 83% of respondents reported that they've discussed political issues at work.
But 85% of employees wish there were no discussions of social or political hot-button topics in the workplace, according to a 2022 study by staffing company Insight Global.
These confrontations from exposure to different views, they're happening. But most employees wish they weren't. Confronting different views hasn't made employees any more comfortable or empathetic to their colleagues on the other side of the polarized divide.
The Brookings study showed that instead of mere exposure to politically different viewpoints, it was genuine connection that created lasting change and that breaks down walls between people divided.
Is this the part where you guys give me some really outside-the-box ideas about how to achieve this, and I just quietly roll my eyes thinking it's never really going to happen?
Yep, this is that part. But look, if your company's goal is to do your part to overcome the biggest political polarization in this country since the Civil War, the most challenging era of antagonism and isolation of our modern time, it's going to take some innovative thinking.
And employers are uniquely positioned to do that important work. Remember, where we can, most Americans silo ourselves with like-minded people, but not at work. Work remains that final frontier.
It might not feel like saving the world, but if your company paves practical ways to create connections between people where they have no other opportunity to connect together, it could be revolutionary. You could start small, like with storytelling.
Storytelling?
Storytelling. Professor Uri Hassan, professor of psychology and neuroscience at Princeton, has discovered that when two people share a story, one telling the story and another listening, the listener's brainwave patterns begin to mirror those of the storyteller.
Without the barriers of hot-tempered topics, people can start small to build connections to one another simply by sharing a story.
Listening to someone tell a story makes your brain function more like theirs does? That's actually really cool, but it does sound a bit like drinking brains. Maybe the captain's onto something after all?
Okay, fair enough. The captain is innovative. But think about it this way. Remember Rajit from the chat? The guy who went hunting with his son. Why was he so proud about it? None of us got to hear that story. And I doubt that that story, told in person, would include as much vitriol as his written comments. It might build a new connection.
Online disinhibition is real. In-person interaction is far more likely to promote empathy and care amongst employees who are otherwise divided. It's got to be in person or at least face-to-face over the web.
What if, in each department at your company, there was a story hour once a month, or a thoughtfully curated book club? For those of you with children, this might not sound so radical. What's the most peaceful moment of parenting, when you feel most connected to your child? Often it's reading a bedtime story. Story hour was always my favorite time of day in kindergarten. I say the science is sound.
Book clubs at work are nothing new, and they don't come without risk. But we can set up guardrails to be sure book clubs or story hours are comfortable and measured opportunity for genuine connection on neutral turf.
Okay, how to create a book club at work in a nutshell. 1, make it voluntary and open to everyone. If you want smaller groups, limit them by logical business lines. 2, have pre-approved discussion questions prepared ahead of time. 3, while title selection can rotate among the members, set up pre-approval of any selections with HR. 4, Remember to creatively explore accommodation for disabled or neurodiverse employees who need adjustments to be able to participate.
And to maximize the full benefit of the brain-drinking science, ask employees to read their favorite passages out loud to the group if they're comfortable doing so. Here's another science-based idea for building connection. Create what Professor Peter Coleman refers to as a baseline of positivity amongst employees. He describes this as having or building relationships with others across the divide that have a sense of friendliness, trust, tolerance, rapport, and ideally humor.
I'm sure each of you can think of at least one friend or colleague you have who's of a different political persuasion than you, but who nonetheless you truly care about. When you think of the connection that you have to that person, it's very likely not one that's based on heated confrontation. You've shared jokes together, perhaps you've built something together. You probably have fond memories of one another. Create opportunities for people to simply have pleasant interactions with one another.
What if your company invested in small group experiences for employees to share together? A field trip to learn to surf, a cooking class, building a home for a family in need, or volunteering at a shelter. Hands-on opportunities to build that baseline of positivity without ever once billing it as an IE&D initiative.
Whoa, hold on a second. I thought corporate forced fun is over. That's pre-pandemic stuff.
You're right. You all may have heard earlier about the case out of France this past year, the employee who won a claim against his employer, claiming that he was wrongfully terminated essentially because he didn't go to happy hour. So it's important to think way outside the box. Connection without forced fun. In a nutshell, what's first, Alyesha?
The pandemic has left many employees with a renewed dedication to setting boundaries between work and life. They're suspicious of perceived efforts to lure them back to the workplace and keep them outside work hours. So plan team building for during the workday.
And the least fun activities are those that might reveal differences in skill or ability among the participants. If it's a competition activity, make it one that no one has done before, or one that relies on a lot of luck. Let learning the activity be an equal playing field.
Hey, fun doesn't have to mean time-consuming, and it doesn't have to mean expensive. Just keep it simple. Set up a board game table in the office kitchen. Invite people to bring puzzles and games from home to play and collaborate during breaks at work. Those ideas can be virtual too. A daily puzzle for teams to complete in a Zoom, a weekly challenge of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon over an email string amongst a team.
And try to rethink the idea of fun entirely. What we're aiming for here is connection, which is not necessarily fun. Often, connection means doing hard things together, sharing negative experiences, creating a sense of collective catharsis. Those annoying IT trainings that management is pestering everyone to do, welcome everyone to the conference room with their laptops to get it done together over pizza. Everyone puts off reviewing monthly invoices until the last minute. Do them together a week early and lend one another a hand.
In fact, speaking of lending a hand, according to social psychologist Heidi Grant, between 75 and 90% of help coworkers give to one another begins with someone asking for help. Set up group meetings to trade ideas and tips with one another, all work-related, of course, and build more positive interpersonal connections amongst employees.
This stuff doesn't sound difficult or tedious. Connection is key. Got it. But what can we do about this bind that my CEO is in? I mean, I thought we had free speech rights and political spending and our brand.
You surely do. But because of that so-called hypocrisy trap, a lot of companies are starting to pull out of political donations altogether. The London Strine publication actually recommends it. They advise there is no such thing as a legitimate corporate political donation program. And companies should halt political spending entirely.
And that might be the way to go if we're considering political actions by the company, especially where those actions could contradict other public-facing positions the company takes. Perhaps go one step farther and create a purposefully apolitical tone from the top to the bottom of the company.
Or you could do the total opposite.
Okay, that sounds scary. What do you mean?
If after all this due diligence, right, after checking for contradictions in the socio-political actions of the company and its leaders, after establishing and reinforcing stopgaps and conduct expectations so things don't go off the rails amongst employees, after building a foundation of collegiality and respect through human connections, so there's an opportunity for more tolerance. If after all of that, your organization's leadership wants to carve out a specific viewpoint on the social, political, or cultural landscape, hey man, go for it.
Go for it?
Yeah, go for it. I mean, no firm can tell your company what its political voice should be, or whether it should use that voice in the first place. Just like you can't change the minds of your employees or your customers, no one can tell your company what its values are. Its political speech is protected by the Constitution, after all. What we're here to do is to help you decide whether to use your company's political voice, and with both eyes open.
That's right. And what we can tell you are our top 3 tips for navigating this tough space in the middle of that red rock and that hard blue place. Claire, what are yours?
First, don't lose sight of just how many of your employees long for a space free from political division. The workplace is the final frontier where that can be created for them. And those politics-free connections have the added benefit of growing empathy without confrontation. Second, your company's executive leadership is likely far more cohesive in its political views than the employee base. Keep that in mind whenever the company uses its voice. Who exactly do we speak for? And third, be authentic. If you are treading into territory that touches on the core foundations of socio-political life to try to rescue civil society, you better mean what you say. Alyesha, what are your top 3 takeaways?
1, own your truth. While we can't tell you what to say with your company's voice, we can help you prepare for the impact it will have, top to bottom. Be prepared to own it and be prepared to stand by it. 2, be proactive, not reactive. Cultivating a workplace of respect and acceptance is not as simple as enforcing your anti-harassment policy when things get ugly. Push against the tide of polarization with positivity and the security of simple human connections. 3, don't set it and forget it. Nothing in the inclusion, equity, and diversity space comes without a little elbow grease. Often, things go most sideways when a company leaves an IE&D initiative, such as an employee resource group or that intranet platform, to its employees and takes a hands-off approach.
You know, I feel like I still don't know where we're headed, but at least now I have some guidelines and ideas for how we can decide who we are.
Tim, you know, we knew this wasn't going to be one of those sessions where we tell you exactly what to do. And I hope that you enjoyed it. But we can tell you that Littler is here to help you navigate the way. We hope we've given you some food for thought and some comfort knowing that you're not alone if you're stuck in the middle. Thanks for being here, Tim. Let's give him a hand.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.